Okay, so we have an awesome question here that gets asked quite a bit in men's group. Looking for recommendations for how to build my self-love. Doesn't seem like there's a lot of literature out there for men around self-love, and this guy Nate's looking for book and podcast recommendations and just general recommendations around uh, how to feel more love for himself, how to build up his self-worth. And I think that's beautiful because a lot of guys struggle from low self-worth. Um, I did for most of my life until recently. I'd say that's the number one thorn in my side has been coming from a disapproving household where my parents used a ton of shame and guilt. And so I didn't feel very good about myself. I felt like I was wrong or I was bad. Just me being me, the way I am, like I'm bad. And then that's the predominant narrative that was running in the background. That's like the software, the virus, or you will, that was running up in the background, constantly influencing my thoughts and my behaviors and all those things. So when I looked at starting to unpack this and get into it and build more self-love, I realized that a lot of the behaviors that I wasn't happy with myself, right? Numbing out with junk food or porn or chasing women when I was a younger, more immature man, or people pleasing, and being a nice guy. They all came back to the same hub, like all roads led to Rome. All the tentacles connected to the same body. It all stemmed from this problem that I wasn't feeling very good about myself. And so I started to read all the books and do all the podcasts, and I tried all sorts of kooky therapies and stuff to try to get at this, because once I saw that, wow, this is really the biggest thing in my life, I wanted to change it, right? I didn't like those things about me. I didn't like those behaviors, and I wanted to change them. So I started getting into all this stuff. What I learned, the short version, is that for me, it was less about building up self-love, like filling myself up with self-love, or learning how to think in a way of self-love. And I tried a lot of that stuff, and it never stuck. It's like this negative thoughts about myself and this general feeling of sadness about who I am or how I show up in the world, feeling like what I do is never good enough, or that was still there, regardless. And so for me, I started to see progress when I went the other way, and I started trying to access those feelings of sadness and try to build a relationship with them, tried to get to know them and those negative thoughts and learned how to manage them, and actually started to get into those feelings that were stuck in my body, stuck in my nervous system that I had from when I was younger. And I started crying those things out. I started shaking those things out. I started yelling those things out, using different therapies and stuff like that. That's where I saw the needle start to move. Things shifted. I noticed I was getting way less triggered in situations where I used to be. I didn't have this negative chatter about myself as much as I used to. And a lot of the unhealthy behaviors that I had really calmed down as well. That were just serving a purpose, right? They were just there to soothe me, almost like an ointment or something, to soothe the sting, like I was feeling low about myself, and so I'd fill that void with food, or I'd fill that void with porn, I'd fill that void with whatever. And so for there were great books along the way, Love Yourself Like Your Life Depends on It, these kinds of things. Some great philosophy books. But ultimately, the things that really moved the needle for me were therapy, so that I could understand and learn how to manage. I learned techniques to manage those thoughts, and then also somatic meditation, which is nothing more than just hanging out with the feelings. I learned that one of the defects of the human body, and there are many, right? We have these beautiful systems that all work harmoniously, but there's a few glitches, and one of them is that the body seems to store stress and emotions if we don't get to express them or move that energy in the moment. The body will store them in the nervous system. They'll kind of get trapped there. And any good massage therapist will tell you that a lot of their clients will cry when they get really good massages, and it's because the nervous system in the body is releasing that energy that's stored. When you're angry, or you're sad, or whatever, your body and your hormones actually release quite a bit of energy into your body so you can deal with that fight or flight kind of stuff, right? So you can run from the tiger or fight your way out of something. And that energy, if it's not moved in the moment, it can get trapped. And so knowing that, and knowing that some of these feelings we have about ourselves, the low self-worth stuff, comes from that, for me, I shifted my focus to trying to get into that stuff. And so one of the things I tried was somatic meditation, which is where I sit with a coach who leads me into meditation, and it's just focusing on the sensations in my body. It's like, where is the tension right now? Even right now, I can feel it a little bit here in my chest, a little bit here in my throat, a little bit in the back of my head. And if I feel triggered, especially when I feel triggered, that's the gift. That's the window of opportunity. I could, instead of doing what I usually do when I feel low about myself, I would, go to, I don't know, junk food or Netflix or whatever, porn. And instead of doing that, I just sit with those feelings and I breathe into it and I just hang out with them. And then what would happen is over time, those feelings would come out. And then, all of a sudden I'd start to cry a little bit. I'm like, where's this coming from? And it's just that well of pain or whatever it is that I had from like years and years of basically being demonstrated by my parents and other people around me that I wasn't good enough. That's how I perceived it. And so it's like, once I got in touch with that and I made friends with it and I encouraged it to be there and try to get it to come out, like as I cried and shook that stuff out, it was just way less triggered. And so that's the stuff that really moved the needle for me. It was like, cognitive behavioral therapy, counseling, whatever you want to call it. And then also somatic meditation. Psychedelics, for me personally, have also been good for this because they typically really come from a place of self-love. So for me, mushrooms have been great for accessing that as well. You just get a different perspective on your thoughts that are running. And then lastly, there's just little techniques, like knowing that that's my tendency. Like, this is why I meditate every morning as well. It's because I want to be present to those thoughts. I want to notice them when they come up. Because when my mind gets down a path of like kind of kicking myself around or being down on myself, I can now spot it really early before it like spirals too low. And I can go, okay, so I'm feeling low about myself because of this thing that happened or this thing that I perceived that's about me that probably isn't about me. What's the opposite of that? What do I have to feel good about myself? How have I showed up well over the last few days? What can I be proud of? How am I awesome? So that's where I go in the moment. I'll catch some of those negative thoughts and then I'll become my cheerleader. And over time that took hold. And so now my mind's more of a cheerleader. So yeah, man, I hope you find this helpful. Probably not what you were looking for, but because I know you asked more for books and other resources, but like really that's the stuff that really got in there. That practice of, I'm triggered. I'm going to go sit with it. I'm going to breathe into it, get those feelings out. And then also just like mental techniques for like managing those tendencies. All right. Great question, man.